I woke up to the sound of children laughing, which would have been a pleasant way to start the day, except I didn't have kids. The laughter wasn't coming from my TV or from a neighbor's backyard. It was right outside my bedroom window. Groggy, I pushed myself up and peeked through the blinds, expecting maybe a group of kids cutting across my yard on their way to school. What I saw instead made me rub my eyes and look again. A full-blown picnic was unfolding on my front lawn. A woman in yoga pants, her blonde hair tied up in a messy bun, was spreading out sandwiches on a gingham blanket like she was in a public park. A toddler, wearing nothing but a sagging diaper, was gleefully dumping juice onto my driveway. A couple of lawn chairs had been plopped down right in front of my porch. A man in cargo shorts was setting up a portable speaker. It was surreal, like I had stumbled into an alternate reality where my home was a public park, and I was the crazy guy for questioning it. Beyond them, a row of unfamiliar cars lined my curb and even my driveway, parked like they belonged there. Still half asleep, I stumbled out of bed, pulled on a hoodie, and walked outside in my slippers. The sun was bright, the air smelled like sunscreen and peanut butter sandwiches, and not a single person seemed to notice me standing there. Can I help you?" I finally said, trying to keep my voice calm. The woman in yoga pants looked up from her snack preparation, blinking at me like she had just noticed me for the first time. "Oh, hi. We're just having a little neighborhood get-together." I stared at her. "On my lawn?" She smiled, the kind of polite but dismissive smile that people give customer service workers before telling them they're wrong. "Yeah. Karen said it was fine." I felt my stomach drop. Of course. Karen. That was the moment I knew I had a serious problem. I took a slow breath, gripping the edge of my hoodie pocket to keep my frustration in check. Maybe this was a misunderstanding, a simple mix-up that could be cleared up with a few words. "Well, actually, it's not fine. This is my property. I didn't give anyone permission to be here." The woman's brows lifted slightly, like I had just said something completely foreign to her. "Oh." She glanced around as if expecting someone else to step in and explain. "Well, we just assumed, Karen said you wouldn't mind." There it was again. That name. I had only been in the neighborhood for a week, but I had already learned that Karen Whitmore's word was apparently law around here. The so-called president of the HOA had introduced herself within 48 hours of me moving in, standing on my porch as if she had personally approved my purchase. She had thrust a stack of documents at me like they were government mandates, informing me that I needed to sign up for the HOA, because everyone joins. I hadn't even glanced at the paperwork before handing it back. "No thanks," I'd said. "My deed isn't part of the HOA, so I'll pass." Her expression had tightened, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line before she had recovered with a syrupy sweet smile. "Well, that's your choice. But we like to keep things uniform around here. I hope you'll still respect our community rules." It hadn't sounded like a suggestion. And now, standing on my own lawn, looking at a bunch of strangers who had decided to make themselves at home on my property, I was realizing that refusing Karen had been a mistake. I exhaled sharply and turned back to the woman. "Karen doesn't own my house." "I do. So I'm asking you all, politely, to pack up and leave." She looked genuinely surprised, as if no one had ever told her no before. There was an awkward pause before she finally let out a little sigh and started gathering up her things. The rest of them followed, slower, with a few people muttering under their breath. I ignored it. It was done. Or so I thought. The next morning, I walked outside to grab the newspaper and nearly tripped over a silver sedan parked dead center in my driveway. My initial thought was that someone had made a mistake. Maybe a guest at a neighbor's house had parked in the wrong spot. No big deal. I left a polite note on the windshield and figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following morning, there were 2 cars. By the end of the week, there were at least 5 different vehicles rotating through my driveway daily, some of them left there for hours. One afternoon, as I was coming back from the store, I spotted a woman unloading grocery bags from the trunk of a minivan, right in front of my garage. I honked once, expecting her to jump, to look embarrassed, to move. She didn't. She kept stacking bags in her arms as if I wasn't even there. I rolled down the window. "Hey, can you move? That's my driveway." The woman, Jessica Monroe, barely glanced at me. "Oh, I'm just dropping some things off for the community potluck." I blinked. "Right. But this is my property." She gave me a blank stare before uttering the now infuriating phrase, "Karen said it was fine." My jaw tightened. I turned off the car, got out, and knocked on Karen's door. When she answered, she looked almost delighted to see me, like she had been expecting this. "Oh dear," she said, tilting her head. "Is there a problem?" I took a breath, keeping my tone controlled. "Yeah. Actually, there is. People keep parking in my driveway. They're acting like my yard is some kind of community park. I don't understand why." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's just the neighborhood being friendly. Since you don't really use your driveway that much, I figured you wouldn't mind a little community sharing." I stared at her, stunned by the sheer audacity of it. "You figured?" Karen gave an infuriating little laugh. "It's just a neighborly arrangement, and really, if you joined the HOA, you'd have a say in these things." And there it was. I felt my fingers curl into fists at my sides. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some innocent mistake. Karen was deliberately trying to make my life difficult to pressure me into falling in line. I forced my voice to stay even. "No." Karen's smile faltered slightly. "Excuse me?" I said no. "If someone parks on my property again, I'll have them towed." For the briefest moment, something in Karen's expression flickered, like she hadn't expected me to push back. But then she smoothed it over with another one of her fake, practiced smiles. "Oh, you wouldn't do that," she said, like she was speaking to a child. "It's just a few cars." I turned and walked away. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The next few days were a test of patience I didn't know I had. Every morning, I'd step outside and find new cars in my driveway, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes a whole row of them, like my property had been turned into a makeshift parking lot for the neighborhood. Notes didn't work. Knocking on doors didn't work. I even stayed outside one evening, waiting for the next entitled idiot to park there so I could confront them directly. The results were all the same. Karen said it was fine. By the end of the week, I wasn't just irritated. I was furious. And then came the final straw. I had just pulled onto my street after a long day at work when I saw my driveway completely blocked. Not 1, not 2, but 3 vehicles were crammed into my space. A minivan, a pickup truck, and a sedan sat side by side, leaving me no room to even pull in. I slammed on my brakes, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I honked. Nothing. I honked again, longer this time. Still nothing. And that's when I saw it. A full-blown barbecue was happening in my front yard. Lawn chairs were sprawled out across my grass. A grill was set up near my front porch, smoke curling into the evening sky. A group of kids ran across my lawn waving sparklers, and standing behind the grill, flipping a burger like he owned the place, was Mike Reynolds. I slammed my car door and marched toward the spectacle, my blood pressure spiking. What the hell is going on? Mike barely glanced up, casual as ever. "Hey, neighbor. Karen said we could have a block party." I exhaled slowly through my nose. "This is my yard." He chuckled like I was making a joke. Relax, man. We're all part of the same community, right? That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't waste another second trying to talk sense into these people. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. The first tow truck arrived within 30 minutes. Then another. And another. One by one, the illegally parked cars were hooked up and hauled away. The moment the first car was lifted onto the truck, the party descended into chaos. Angry neighbors rushed outside, shouting in disbelief. Karen stormed across the street, her face red with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned to her, completely calm. "Getting my property back." Her mouth flapped open and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't do this. These are your neighbors." "No," I said, arms crossed. "They're trespassers. And since they're illegally parked, they can get their cars back after paying the towing fees." Karen looked like she was about to explode. She spun around, trying to rally the neighbors, but they were furious at her now. "You said it was fine," a woman yelled. "You told us he wouldn't mind," another snapped. Karen tried to protest, tried to talk her way out of it, but it was too late. The damage was done. The neighborhood was turning against her. As the tow trucks pulled away, dragging car after car down the street, I finally did something I hadn't been able to do since moving in. I enjoyed my front yard. But Karen? She wasn't done yet. The next morning, I walked outside, expecting peace, but instead, I found an empty space where my own car had been. For a second, I thought maybe it had been stolen. But then I saw it, a bright pink notice taped to my mailbox. HOA violation notice, unauthorized vehicle on community property. I stared at it in disbelief. Karen had my car towed. I stormed across the street, pounding on her door. She answered with the most smug expression I had ever seen. "Good morning, Ethan," she chirped, sipping her coffee. "Where's my car?" She sighed dramatically. "It was towed. It was parked illegally, you see. If you were a member of the HOA, you would have been notified of the new parking regulations." I almost laughed at the insanity of it. "You had my car towed from my own driveway." Karen smiled. "Rules are rules." I took a slow breath. "All right. We're playing this game, then." She tilted her head, still smirking. "What game?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice just enough. "The one where I ruin you." Her smirk faltered just for a second. Just enough for me to see a flicker of doubt cross her eyes. I turned away, already dialing the police. Within an hour, I had my car back. Turns out, Karen had no authority to tow it. Even better. The city officials were very interested in the fact that she had paid a towing company with HOA funds. And that was just the beginning. Because I wasn't going to stop at just getting my car back. I was about to make sure that Karen Whitmore never messed with me, or anyone else, ever again. Karen thought she had won. She thought towing my car was the ultimate power move, a checkmate that would finally force me to fall in line. What she didn't realize was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had escalated from being a nuisance to breaking the law, and now, I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end her. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but an old college friend who specialized in property disputes and HOA corruption. When I explained what had been happening, the unauthorized use of my driveway, the illegal towing of my car, and Karen's blatant abuse of power, he didn't just agree to take my case. He was excited. Within 2 days, he had filed a formal complaint against the HOA, citing multiple violations of property rights and misuse of funds. But that wasn't all. He also dug into the HOA's financial records, something Karen never expected anyone to do. What he found was pure gold. Karen hadn't just been using the HOA as a power trip. She had been embezzling money for years. The so-called community improvement fees that she had tacked onto houses? Fake. The extra charges for landscaping maintenance that no one ever saw? A lie. The funds she had collected from HOA members mysteriously disappearing into a private account? Oh yeah, that was real. And the best part? She had been funneling that money into her personal lifestyle, vacations, expensive handbags, luxury spa memberships. Karen wasn't just a dictator. She was a crook. The next HOA meeting was a bloodbath. Word had spread fast, and the room was packed. Even homeowners who had never cared about HOA politics before were there, eager to see what would unfold. Karen sat at the front, stiff-backed and confident, like she still believed she could talk her way out of this. Then my lawyer walked in. And everything changed. One by one, he laid out the financial records. The missing funds. The fraudulent charges. The blatant theft. Gasps filled the room. Some people stood up in shock. Karen's confidence started to crack. She tried to deny it at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But then someone, one of her own former supporters, demanded to know where the money had gone. That's when the screaming started. The same neighbors who once blindly followed her now turned on her. People demanded refunds. Others yelled about pressing charges. Karen went pale. She tried to restore order, banging a gavel on the table, but it was useless. The room had exploded into chaos. And then the HOA board did the one thing she never expected. They voted her out. Karen stood up, shaking, furious. "You can't do this," she spat. "You need me. I built this community." But no one was listening anymore. As I sat back in my chair, arms crossed, I watched as Karen's entire world crumbled around her. The woman who had spent years controlling everyone, dictating every little aspect of the neighborhood, had lost it all in a matter of minutes. The meeting ended with a final, crushing blow. The HOA, now in complete disarray, had no choice but to dissolve entirely. Without Karen running the show, people stopped paying fees. No one stepped up to take over. Within weeks, the HOA collapsed. Karen was finished. But she didn't go quietly. She tried one last desperate move, a lawsuit against me, claiming that I had defamed her by exposing her fraud. She actually had the audacity to say that I had ruined her reputation and that I owed her for emotional distress. The case didn't even make it past the first hearing. The judge took one look at the stack of evidence against her, let out a sigh, and dismissed the case outright. Karen was humiliated. That was the moment she realized she had nothing left. A week later, "For sale" sign went up in her yard. She was leaving. No announcement. No farewell. She packed up and disappeared like a thief in the night. Rumor had it she moved to another HOA-run community a few towns over. I could only imagine how long it would take before she tried pulling the same stunts there. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Because for the first time since I had moved into this neighborhood, I could finally enjoy the peace and quiet I had fought so hard for. The day Karen left was the first time in months that the neighborhood felt light. It was like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind clear skies and fresh air. No more HOA notices stuffed in mailboxes. No more ridiculous fines for imaginary violations. No more people walking on eggshells, afraid of what Karen might do next. It was over. And to celebrate, we did the one thing she would have hated the most. We threw a block party. This time, it wasn't some forced, Karen-approved event with rigid rules and fake smiles. This was real. People brought food, dragged out coolers, played music, without anyone standing over them telling them the approved decibel levels. Kids ran around with chalk and water balloons, and for the first time since moving in, I actually felt like part of a community. As I leaned against my porch, drink in hand, I saw Mr. Harris, one of the older residents, walking over with a smirk. He handed me a beer and nodded toward the party. "You know, I've lived here for 20 years, and I've never seen this place so happy." I chuckled. "Guess all it took was getting rid of the right person." He shook his head. "No, son. It took you standing up to her. The rest of us just went along with it because we thought we had no choice." He glanced at the crowd, the laughter, the relaxed faces of people who had spent years under Karen's thumb. "You reminded us that we do." I let his words sink in as I looked out over the neighborhood I had fought for. No more passive-aggressive letters. No more random cars in my driveway. No more power-hungry HOA president trying to control every aspect of our lives. Just a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, the way it was supposed to be. Karen was gone. The HOA was dead. And for the first time since moving in, my home finally felt like mine. But as I watched the sun dip below the rooftops, I couldn't help but wonder, how long would it take before Karen tried to pull the same trick somewhere else? And more importantly, would the next neighborhood be ready for her? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.